Forkast.News is your gateway to all things blockchain. We do the deep dive and the due diligence on the blockchain projects and platforms that matter, because we aim to be the most reliable source of intellectual discourse and insight that inform, educate, and bridge the gap between the blockchain industry and the mainstream. Welcome to this special edition from Paris. We're here at the OECD Global Blockchain Policy Forum. I'm Forkast.News Editor-in-Chief Angie Lau, and I am here with the woman of the past 48 hours, many hours, and certainly this has been hard work from you and your team. Yes. This is Caroline Malcolm, and she is head of OECD Blockchain Policy Center. Thank you. And this was really a project, a conference that came from a recognition of what?
So maybe just step back a little bit to the Blockchain Policy Center itself. So the Policy Center is a fairly new creation of the OECD. It's only been in existence for about 9 months, but it reflects, in fact, about 5, almost 6 years of work now that the OECD has been doing in this space. And as we began to see the development of the technology and increasing adoption of the technology, there was a recognition from our members that they really needed to make sure they understood the technology better. And so they took a decision at the end of last year, fresh off the back of the first issue of this forum, to establish the Blockchain Policy Center. So when we thought about doing another forum and creating another conversation around the last 2 days, what we really wanted to do was take a step forward. Last year was very much about, what is blockchain? Very basic level. As is often the case, the technology in the industry moves very far ahead. Public sector is left in a response reaction situation. And so we wanted to say, first year, we all discovered what blockchain was. It was a learning experience for all of us. And now, second year in, we wanted to see, well, what are the industry developments, obviously, of the last 12 months? But then to take the next part of that question, which is, so what are the policy implications of that? Mm-hmm. Does our current policy framework work to achieve the objectives that our communities expect from government? So, and that really has two sides. It's obviously, it's not just about policy and regulation and making sure that there's a minimization of the risks involved with certain types of innovation, but it's also about saying, well, what is the role in helping foster that right kind of innovation? And I think in creating the conversations we've heard in the last 2 days, something that suddenly we're very mindful of having that balance.
It's a critical question that one must ask yourself if you're a regulator or a policymaker, because at the end of the day, you want to preserve the mandates of your community, of your government, of your nation, but at the same time be flexible enough to foster innovation. That flexibility
right. Exactly.
must live alongside enforcement, regulation.
Exactly. And ensuring that there's a level playing field, new entrants to a field, obviously, because you often have that lag time, that sometimes, they're able to move ahead quite quickly before there's a recognition that, in fact, this technology brings benefits, but it also brings some risks, and we have to think about, protecting the community from that, but not to the extent that we stamp out the innovation.
Where are we in the cycle of that? I mean, I feel like when it was the ICO phase, a lot of regulators were absolutely
horrified,
caught off guard.
Yes.
But so as we meet once again in this environment, where do you think, is there more assimilation, more synchronicity when it comes to what blockchain innovation and projects and teams are doing alongside regulators starting to understand not only the technology, but the implications of it?
I think there's definitely been a progression, certainly in the maturity of the discussion. A year ago, I was still explaining, what is blockchain. We think today I will go into meetings with policymakers and regulators, and, immediately the question, well, why are you talking about blockchain? Isn't this distributed ledger technology? So they start to understand the nuances of what's happening in industry, start to get a grasp on the language, although, as we've heard in the last 2 days, there's still still quite a lot of problems with the language. We do have a need to be specific if we want to actually address the issues which are problematic and foster those which aren't. So I'd say there's certainly been a progression, and I also think that reflects understanding on policymakers, but also maturity of the industry.
Yeah.
So those good actors, if I can use that phrase, in the field realize that they need a regulatory, a policy framework if there is to be longevity in the field. And they also realize the risks of short-term, quick money projects which don't have a strong foundation and don't have those sort of broader values of our community in mind.
Top takeaways from this conference in your mind?
Yes.
Day one,
Yes.
Bruno Le Maire kicks things off
He did.
and causes a firestorm.
He did.
Do you think that that's as specific when he said that we must not allow a Libra project to proceed? Or was there nuance in that?
I think there's a lot more nuance than we first heard in the reporting of Bruno Le Maire's remarks. And I mean, it's very clear, and I think a number of policymakers, not just France, recognize that although we've seen stablecoin projects before, the reach that a project which is associated with Facebook has, the potential for mass adoption, is what is really shifting the landscape. So the stablecoin concept is not particularly new, but the mass adoption that Libra represents is, and that's really pushing that discussion forward. So obviously, there's always that balance between what's important and what's urgent. So from what we've heard, we see an urgent need to address the issue of stablecoins, mass adoption, and it's really pushing forward the debate around central bank digital currencies. Are they something that governments should pursue? Are they something, what are the risks of pursuing those? And risks not just in terms of macroeconomic risks, which are clearly evident, but also in terms of, competition risks, tax issues, consumer protection, investor education. There is a lot in there that we need to make sure that we consider as part of the discussion. And yet at the same time, and I think we've heard this a lot in the last 2 days, the innovation is happening. So it's very difficult to say, stop, it's not going to happen. Innovation, and even if there are such decisions, it's going to push innovation in a separate direction. So, and that can have counterproductive effects as well. So I think that issue around stablecoins, central bank digital currency is an urgent one in terms of what's going to happen on the policy front in the next 6 to 12 months. And then we have some very important issues around things like digital identity, for example, governance of decentralized systems more generally, that we've started to hear come out of the forum, which are, I guess, a little bit more holistic. They cut across many of the different applications of the technology, but beginning to understand, I see amongst policymakers linking, a supply chain application to, but there's this digital identity question which needs to be answered regardless of the particular application. So we need to be thinking about those fundamentals as well. And I think that's one of the important things. It doesn't feel urgent, but I think extremely important.
Well, it is, in terms of end user, if you think about the role of governments, this is potentially technology that could create efficiencies to administrate the nature of business of governments. So let's talk about GovTech. That was one of the key panels, working panels. What came out of it? What do you think is going to be driving the thinking around blockchain technology and GovTech? Yeah,
and I think what we really like to see in the GovTech space is understanding that, well, first of all, blockchain is just a tool like any other. It's not an end in itself. And it's very, very important. These are expensive technologies to develop. And so what we don't want to see is everybody, creating their own near identical project. We'd like to see that sharing, that international cooperation, so that we can all not reinvent the wheel, learn from each other, and actually progress in that way, whether it be from sharing knowledge of our own individual projects or even collaborating on projects, because there's a lot of cross-border issues there. So I think in the GovTech space, we're also starting to see things move more into actually in practice rather than simply the proof of concept stage. And what's very interesting, in a conversation earlier today was, in some ways, we have seen this in practice in government, in a country like Estonia for 10 years now. The question is how to make other policymakers comfortable with taking that leap from the theoretical into the practical and actually having a working level system in place, which is based around DLT technology.
Well, I think one of the things that was, controversial, whether it depends on which part of the issue that you stand on, is the Financial Action Task Force and the FATF regulatory guidance that came down.
Yes.
It's being adopted by all the different nations. It's that collaborative effort on KYC and AML very specifically.
Yes.
How did that dynamic kind of gain ground as a working dynamic for governments and regular and regulators?
Yes.
And do you think that we're going to start seeing more of one centralized collaborative point that will start issuing policy on other aspects of blockchain technology?
Look, I mean, a standard setter like FATF, they are working at, a collaborative international level. And I think that's obviously got a lot of benefits when you're thinking about a technology, which knows no borders. You can create a token in one jurisdiction, use it in another to transfer to a third jurisdiction. It's very difficult to control that process. What you can control is the rules around it. And that's exactly what you've seen happen in the FATF case. And I think perhaps the strength of the way they developed that work was really in the very intense amount of industry consultation that took place over a significant amount of time to try both, obviously, understand the realities of the technology, what is possible, what is not possible, understand where the industry is at today, but also recognize that, the role of governments is to act in the interest of the general population, not one particular sector, or the other. And so in doing that, shaping a regulatory response which tried to balance those different issues. There was no question, obviously, that the rules will see changes, the new recommendation will see changes take place in the industry. But I think those changes are necessary and part of the maturity of the industry to say, there is this need, we're supportive of innovation, but it has to be innovation which is in pursuit of the common good. And that's really what those rules are about trying to achieve.
And so if you are a startup founder right now and you're in the blockchain community and you're trying to figure out your own business value proposition, how should you be thinking about these conversations that are taking place right here at the OECD in Paris these past 2 days? How, what kind of guidance or kind of thinking from this part of the landscape that directly affects doing business?
Absolutely. And, it's quite a challenge. And it's something we tried to achieve with this year's forum is to bring in more startups. We know that's a challenge because they're very busy building their product, which is very understandable. They're very busy, raising money to make sure they can keep the doors open. But there's two reasons why we wanted the startup community to get more involved. One is that we wanted for them to have an understanding of the policy issues, and that's extreme, and to see where the debate is going. So they're not in a situation that they develop a product while at the same time the policy discussion is maturing, decision is made that will affect the environment in which they're expected to operate, and suddenly their product may not be, have the relevance that it might have anymore. So that was one reason. The second reason was we wanted to understand better what are the specific policy issues that are facing startups, whether it be specific to blockchain or more generally relating to tech companies, where governments can support the industry more effectively. We have a couple of projects underway at the moment looking at those very issues because, I think it was said very well this morning in the Next Big Thing panel that governments are not against innovation and, development of business opportunities and commercialization, but it does need to be within certain rails. And I think they are learning to try and understand where those rails should be, sort of traditional values, but in this environment of new technology. And so understanding of what particular issues a startup might face is extremely important for them to be able to do that effectively.
So if, on behalf of everyone who might be watching from that point of view, what are the policy themes and issues that people in the community who are building right now should be aware of from a regulator's point of view?
It's actually a great question, because one of the things that we will pick up after the forum is the development of a framework of policy principles. It's something we've been discussing with our members for a number of months now. It reflects also some work that was done at the OECD in the artificial intelligence space. And the idea is really to give governments some guidance on, if you're developing a national strategy on blockchain or something more specific, regulation on a particular area that will affect blockchain implementation. These are the issues that you need to have in mind. And that's actually something which, we have in mind to develop over the coming 12 months. So I really hope that when we're back here next year for the forum, which will be 30th September, 1st of October, take the opportunity to mention it for those of you who want it in your diaries already, that we will actually, I hope, be in a position to be announcing the outcomes of that work.
Well, it's important work. It's the work that definitely the industry also wants to be collaborators on. So it is interesting to hear how these conversations have evolved. Yes. Once upon a time, this policy blockchain center did not exist at the OECD. Right. Your role did not exist.
Exactly.
Certainly a lot of the subjects that people are talking about did not even exist.
That's true.
So as we talk about the what's next in the coming months,
yes.
So we're going to be expecting more policy guidance from the OECD.
Absolutely.
And how do you regard also the geopolitical kind of environment in which we speak too? No, there's a lot of finance and trade tensions that exist. How is that also affecting any policy? Is that starting to intrude into business, into even technology?
Yeah, I mean, look, those different tensions between countries is something we deal with at the OECD all of the day. I mean, yes, we're in a particular moment on a particular issues, where we might see, heightened tensions that we haven't seen in more recent history. But, this is the core business of the OECD actually, is working between countries with different positions to find common ground. So it's actually very much at the core of what we do. So we will continue the process that we have applied successfully in the past, which is lots and lots of conversations. And that includes conversations not just with governments, but with members of industry, civil society, academia, to make sure we get those different stakeholders actually engaged in the process and helping to develop the end product. At the Blockchain Policy Center, our goal here is not to promote blockchain technology. It's to help governments understand what are the upsides of the technology, what are the downsides, when is it appropriate to use blockchain, when is it not appropriate to use blockchain, and help them understand if they do apply it in a particular area or they're looking to create a particular policy around it, what are the things they need to have in mind. And that's a process which is very much collaborative. Why we tried to bring so many people here for the forum. The forum for us it's not a be-all and the end-all. It's not the event in itself. It's an opportunity to hear from industry, feed the work we have ongoing, and also seed new work to understand, okay, what's coming up, what do we need to be thinking about to make sure we're not left behind, over the next 12, 18 months. So that's extremely important role for us at the forum. And
certainly not leaving anyone in a position to be horrified by the technology that races before us, because it is a team effort.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely, and it's fast moving. I mean, it's extremely fast moving, and the goal is not to slow that down, but for us to improve our way of understanding it.
Thank you for your work, and thank you for these past 2 days.
It's a pleasure, Angie. Really, thank you.
Thank you for continuing this conversation at a global scale and every scale. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie.
Bye.